Good evening. The news gang is here. Ciagana ni Ciagana, anger in mother tongue. But just what was lost in translation? Also on the show tonight, the interior fight in Jubilee. What happened to the co-presidency? And handshake and demons all in one book. Is Mudavadi still the Lionel Messi, or is he messed up? We'll also have the kicker, the memo, the punchline, and the angle. Yvonne is still away on leave tonight. We will begin with that soundbite. Ciagana ni Ciagana.
Unaona to kana ne to kwaranĩria ndeto ici. Ne to kwaranĩria. Ne to kwaranĩria. Tondũ nĩ tũrakinya handũ tukaiga atĩrĩrĩ, Ciagana nĩ Ciagana, nĩ twanoga. Kana ini atia? Matinani na mbere ya turute riboti. Neguo mara toire mathiũrũrũka mweri mugima magĩtũhũyũkagĩra maũndũ mangĩ rĩu nĩ oima rĩu nĩ igĩ nĩ barabara ĩngĩ wacio nĩ andũ mataramenya kũrĩa marathiĩ.
So Francis, it is you basically to help us with the translation, because I only understood Ciagana ni Ciagana ni Tuanoga, which was kind of, we are tired, right?
I thought you were going to ask Jamila to translate. But the easiest way to have the wrong translation
Jamila is from Kericho.
Is to ask Jamila. The closest you can get is maybe Linus. Narok.
Yeah, and I remember Ciagana ni Ciagana was a play by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Yes. Enough is enough.
Absolutely. And
it was actually not a very welcome play. It was banned at some point in the country.
Cameredo.
Yeah.
That is where it comes from. You see what the president was basically telling. We will say who he was telling. We will discuss who he was telling. But what basically he was saying is that enough is enough. He was alluding to the debate, the political debate prior to the unveiling of the BBI report, that there was all this discussion, political discussion, very heated at that time, on what could be contained in that report. And he says there's very same people who were taking the country through that very rigorous political process, telling them what was likely to be in that report. You remember that debate about the possibility of a prime minister slot, return to a shift to a parliamentary system from the presidential system, that they're now diverting the nation to another direction in terms of the implementation. And this now invites the question on who was the president addressing. Basically, he was addressing the Mount Kenya political leadership that is pro-Tanga-Tanga. But one would further that argument and say he was addressing his deputy, because if he was addressing members of parliament who are pro-Tanga-Tanga, then you also look at who is the head of that team that he was addressing. And you can say he was addressing the deputy president without necessarily addressing him. And when he addresses those who are closer to him, then the message probably was meant for him via his people.
Yeah, which is interesting, Linus. I mean, remember, this is not the first time the president is resorting to his Kikuyu language, because, I mean, many people would expect he's the president, why is he speaking in a different language? But we have seen this during the Akorino event that was at Kasarani. We saw it during the Ciagana meeting, and he seems to fall into this sort of mother tongue space when he wants to address a particular issue and when he's speaking to particular people.
Let me start, Joe, with the question of language. I think in terms of the optics, President Uhuru Kenyatta is not doing well with how quickly he always descends back to his native Kikuyu language, especially because in the 2 occasions he has done that. Actually 3, because there was one time, I don't know whether you remember, Francis, when President Uhuru Kenyatta was on his way to a summit in Arusha, Tanzania, recently. Yeah. He stopped in Kitengela, and part of the language that he spoke in Kikuyu. You know, in the presidential club, there have been 4 presidents in the last 56 years in this country. You all remember when we were in primary school, there was something called a disc. He has picked it so many times as president. The optics are not good.
But I wonder who gave it to him, because President Kibaki hardly ever spoke in Kikuyu. Yeah.
Well, it has been in his pocket, I think, and he's not collected it from any of the presidents. Because if you look in the past, for example, not once did Mwai Kibaki speak in his native language, whether he's under pressure or whether he's not. Not once do we have it on record President Daniel Arap Moi is speaking Kalenjin just because
it was very difficult to know pressure. That he actually spoke Kalenjin at all.
Absolutely, but there's something that comes out here, and I would put it this way: whenever somebody is exclaiming, for example, we all exclaim in our native languages. It's when you're under pressure, maybe even when you're screaming, you're saying, "Guy, you know, something like that," and that is what keeps happening here. In both occasions that President Uhuru Kenyatta has been using his language, he is being under immense political pressure in his own backyard. Mm-hmm. So he's crying out, he's pleading, listen to me, I'm speaking to your hearts, not your heads. It's Nelson Mandela that said that if you speak to somebody in their native language, you're speaking to their hearts. But is he that defeated by his deputy, William Ruto? Is he under pressure that much that he always has to plead in Kikuyu? I guess yes. There's something that has happened in central Kenya in terms of this Jubilee divide. We're calling it a civil war within Jubilee. The fact is, his deputy William Ruto has been able to make inroads without using state house. Basically, he's done bypasses into central Kenya, and that has been putting him under a lot of pressure. It has made the president to speak his language, and that it does that to plead. Is crying out for help, Joe.
But before Jamila comes in, I think we have that soundbite where the president was speaking again in mother tongue when he was at Kasarani addressing that Akorino meeting.
Omothe ne nguga na ndaria na ruga itu na no guthiururuka gwitu na ni ngwira andu mikore no tuthurite tureta siasa matigecirie nie ndikihi kiao na matikundugamia barabara iria ndithondekeire iria ndirenda gukinya na kuria ndirenda gutwara andu aitu na kuria ndirenda kumakinyia.
Joe, I think before Gashuri tells us what the president was saying there, you know, when it ran, he laughed. And, you know, the rest of us tumeangalia tu tukisikiza.
Heavy stuff. I mean,
today News Gang is sounding like Kererembe.
But the point here, I think, is the president's anger has been palpable, not just lately, but in the past few months. And I think we sometimes express ourselves better when we speak in our mother tongue. And I think the people he's speaking to wataelewa zaidi what he's trying to say. Kwa sababu the anger, the frustration, hata when you translate for us, like Shuri you did for yesterday's event, I don't think we really get the essence of what he was trying to say, despite our best efforts to try and translate it into English and Swahili for everybody else to understand. That's one. And two, I think what we need to look at is that the fact that the president now has started slowly going back to central Kenya. Remember that these complaints from leaders from the area and even residents saying that rais ameacha kuja huku siku hizi, hakuna miradi ya maendeleo, hatumuoni. I think yesterday alienda kufungua mradi kama sijakosea ya hospitali Gashuri.
Lakini ulikuwa mradi wa kanisa.
Wa kanisa, but he was there. You know, that presence also makes a difference. Number two, I think he has another event this weekend, also recently, not this weekend, coming soon in central Kenya. So anajaribu sasa kwenda kujikwaendia tena. Kwa sababu as you've said, Linus, you put it so aptly, saying that slowly the deputy president has started making small inroads into central Kenya, and I think the president needs to start getting worried. He needs to be seen to be back home kwa wale watu ambao walimuunga mkono kabisa in the past two elections.
And Jamila, you point it out right, and I just want to refer back to the last transition from President Mwai Kibaki to President Uhuru Kenyatta, and how cruel central Kenya political trends can be, especially for a serving or outgoing president. What is going to happen is President Uhuru Kenyatta, as we move close to 2022, his tone will continue to rise. He'll plead even more, because the way it works with central Kenya, going by what we covered in the last transition, that is 2012-2013, the election, the transition from Mwai Kibaki to Uhuru Kenyatta, is that region tends to have a mind of its own. It moves from the serving president to new possibilities without reference to the
which is an interesting situation, considering the fact that unlike now, because there is a little unknown here. I mean, it is, I think, a very uncharted territory in that respect. I mean, last time, remember we had Mwai Kibaki. So it was essentially the leadership moving from a son of the soil to another. Right now, we have these unknown waters where right now Uhuru Kenyatta is definitely leaving power. At least that's what the Constitution says. And when you scan the landscape in central Kenya, you don't quite see who that mantle might fall on in terms of how political leadership usually is appropriated in this country, where you have people who from a region sort of looking around to see who the kingpin is going to be. Right now, there isn't a kingpin in central Kenya, and William Ruto has been making good use of that fact, and he has moved in, as Linus was saying, through a bypass. And so what is going on now is that without reference to Uhuru, he has made inroads on his own. But now the question is, because we've never seen this, there's no precedent where, since the return of multi-party politics in 1992, we've not seen a precedent where there is a change of leadership, where there's a transition, but central Kenya does not have a kingpin in the traditional sense of Kenyan politics. So this is really going to be interesting stuff to just watch how it plays out without that in the cuts. But there is another element here, ladies and gentlemen, that this fight seems to have got a notch higher when the Interior Cabinet Secretary Matiang'i Fred Okengo was somewhere in Kirinyaga, in Kagio specifically, and he was basically talking about the fact that yeye anajua tu mwanaume moja in charge of the boma that is called Jubilee. Let's listen to him and then we'll pick up this conversation.
Ndio, ukweli ni kwamba wakati mwingine tunakuwa wakali, kwa sababu waje niseme hata hapa mkiwa hapa, sisi hatupendangi mambo ya upuzi kubebana hivi, kazi lazima ifanywe. Sababu tulipewa kazi tufanye, na mheshimiwa rais wetu ametupea kazi tufanye. Kama inchi inatawaliwa na inalindwa kama boma inalindwa. Boma ina mtu wa kuongoza mmoja. Kuna mtu hapa akona familia ambayo inaongozwa na wazee wawili? Hapana, familia inaongozwa na mzee mmoja. Sisi tunafanyia Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta kazi.
Who else would he be working for, Linus?
You see, Joe, this was a big blow. Basically, Matiang'i took the big rungu and
swung
it quite literally, because he ended the pretense about what this has all been about. It's been about, especially in the first term, the perception that President Uhuru Kenyatta and Deputy President William Ruto were treating each other and behaving as if they are co-presidents. And you remember from the speeches of this first term, whenever the Deputy President is speaking, he'll always say, Mimi na Rais. Mm-hmm. That was completely new in terms of how the office of the second in command is executed. But we also said it in this show that it must have not been going down well, especially with the power clique around President Uhuru Kenyatta, because basically William Ruto was overstepping the bounds of his office. He was basically matching his boss. And in many, many occasions, he spoke as if they were equals. I think that went into the nerves of the political establishment. And now they are hitting back and saying, no, second term, there'll be one president.
Yes, Linus, look at it this way. There's a very close connection between the topic we discussed a little earlier and this one. Because, first of all, when the president speaks in such a solid manner and in an angry manner and in Kikuyu language, there's no doubt as to who he's addressing. He's basically addressing a group of members of parliament who are allied to the deputy president. And you've heard these members of parliament every so often complain that the deputy president is being mistreated by Harambee House, i.e. the CS in charge of interior affairs and his principal secretary. And every so often you've heard them say, there have been instructions that county commissioners and county commanders should not attend Deputy President William Ruto's functions, that they have been instructed even to keep the armed police officers away. So all these things have been said silently. But finally the discussion is now out there.
In the open, yes.
It is now out there in the open. Earlier on I was giving Joe an analogy. Back in Banana, there's something they say about a pregnancy. Initially, it can be hidden. And when you ask, somebody will tell you, oh, Sina, or they will tell you ni malaria. But as it grows, in Kikuyu, they say inaanza kupoteza nguo, you know. So initially, when there was talk about disharmony in the Jubilee administration.
But Francis, in all fairness, in this situation, there's so many pregnancies.
that time initially, when there was talk about the acrimony in Jubilee, the division in Jubilee, the response at that time was it was a figment of the imagination of the media. Actually, we were told the media is fomenting division in Jubilee that do not exist. Those are the signs of that pregnancy.
In Kano days, it would have been called people who are hell-bent on causing fear and despondency among peace-loving Kenyans.
So eventually now, it is everyone can see that it's not, all is not well. In fact, the discussion is no longer as to whether there is a fight in Jubilee, but the extent of that fight. And what basically CS Matiang'i did in Kagio over that on Friday was to verbalize that acrimony. You know, he left no doubt as to who he is affiliated to. Remember, in this very same discussion, in this very same news gang, we said there were even cabinet ministers who are allied to the deputy president and those who are allied to the president. Today, I've heard Samson Cherargei, the senator for Nandi, say as they go to Naivasha for that meeting, they will also be addressing 3 cabinet secretaries that they say wana mazoea ya kumjibu deputy president. Leaves no guess. It is most likely CS Matiang'i, CS Mushero, and CS Masharia.
When we speak about Matiang'i, Gashuri, Linus, and Joe, I remember Executive Order number 1, 2019, where he was appointed Chief Minister, and we were calling him Mr. Fix-It, remembering his journey through the ministries. When he started at the Ministry of ICT, he was appointed because of implementing the e-government project at the time. Then he moved on to education, and there are all these changes, measures to try and curb cheating, and then, of course, the Interior Ministry. His personality is one that cannot be ignored. He comes in, he arrives, and he sort of like takes over everything. And I think it's what has really led us to this point, the fact that he's seen to be the president's man, considering the fact that out of all the cabinet secretaries, one was picked to be almost like the chief minister. He conducts meetings and he's in charge of some of the implementing government projects. I think some roles which should have been the deputy president. I think we look at it that way in terms of now what next for one Matiang'i, considering the fact that now all the cards are all on the table, exactly who is on whose side. And I think going forward now, before we move on, Linus, I'm sure you'd want to talk about this. Can we listen to the sound bites?
The responses, I mean, because the root of brigade, if you were to call them that, responded in kind.
Absolutely.
Nataka niwaulize wafanyikazi wa serikali. Kila mtu ambaye umepatiwa kazi na Uhuru Kenyatta na serikali ya Jubilee, wacha kupiga kifua, wacha kiburi, wacha madharau, kwa sababu nyinyi mnafanya kazi na serikali hii ilichaguliwa na hawa wananchi. Musione eti wananchi hawa ni wajinga, eti kwa sababu hawana ofisi kubwa kama yenu. Iyo maofisi kubwa kubwa muko nazo, wenye kuwapatia ni hawa wananchi wadogo hawa. Watu wa bodaboda, wale mama mboga, wale watu ambao mnawadharau. Those are the people who put you in office. Wakati mnaenda kwa wananchi, endeni kwa kunyenyekea. Na musiseme ya kwamba eti mumetumwa na rais muende muongee na madharau kwa wananchi. Mimi namjua Uhuru Kenyatta, rais wetu. Ni mtu mungwana, ni mtu mpole, hajawahi kutumia madharau kwa wananchi. Kwa hivyo hiyo madharau yenu hiyo na kiburi muko naye, hiyo ni yenu. Hamujatumwa na mtu yeyote na hamujatumwa na rais.
Joe, you know what,
But weren't there also other MPs?
Yeah, there were. We will play them shortly. But you know what? Listen to what the deputy president is saying. He's saying, mimi namjua Rais Uhuru Kenyatta. Ni mtu mngwana, mnyenyekevu, hawezi kuwatuma kuongea kwa madharau. He will not in any way directly attack the president. The same way you've not seen the president directly attack him. Proxy wars,
is that pregnancy analogy again?
Yes. And that's now these sound bites from Rigathi Gachagua, the member of parliament for Madeira, back to back with the member of parliament for Kikuyu, Kimani Ichung'wah.
Sasa sisi tumekaa Bomas, tunaambiwa ati iko rais wawili. Ati rais tulichagua, ati mwingine ati people's president. Mimi nimesema Your Excellency, ile mkutano nitaenda kuanzia leo going forward ni mkutano wa rais moja peke yake.
Sasa wewe Matiang'i, siku mbili umekula, umeshiba, tunajua yale ulifanya haraka na hatujasahau. Sasa umeanza kututapikia maneno ati utaki upuzi. Utajua na sisi ni wanaume, ushenzi pia hatutaki. Sababu unakimbiza watu hapa na polisi, ati tutakuogopa sababu uko na mapolisi. Leta wote, utashika sisi wote. Kama utatukula, tutoshe kwa hiyo tumbo yako, tukule. Lakini kwa Ruto, sisi hatuondoki na hatushurutishwi.
Wow. Very strong sentiments.
It's a cannibal affair in some respects.
It is, and how much changes in a very, very short, is it 2 or 3 years?
Yeah.
Because I want us to listen to this, just one more bite from 2017. Deputy President Ruto defending Matiang'i in very, very clear terms.
Wachana na Matiang'i. Matiang'i kazi yake ni kuhakikisha ya kwamba kuna ulinzi wa kutosha.
And that time he was actually defending Matiang'i against attacks from, at that point, NASA people, isn't it?
Not just the attacks from NASA people, but the events around which the police were conducting very, very brutal operations against opposition supporters. Basically, the same machine or the same animal, beast, basically, as stand on its owner, basically, in a very short time. That's what Matiang'i has become now to the Ruto wing of the Jubilee.
I would imagine, actually, right now, it is the Uhuru Kenyatta wing and the ODM people who would be saying, wachana na Matiang'i, isn't it?
Actually, they have said. There was a news conference in Bunge, Gladys Wanga leading other members of parliament defending Matiang'i. Something you would not have seen 2 years ago. How things change and quickly so. And this tells you of the kind of a situation that you're going to experience as time goes on. Now the question is, will these attacks be directed directly at the target? Because when the deputy president says some of these things about Matiang'i, and on the other hand, the CSs are saying these things against the deputy president, you can see where it's coming from and where it's headed. Only that there's no courage yet to directly attack the persons who are meant to be. Like, why would the president attack so viciously members of parliament who are allied to the deputy president? And you can already tell the target. Maybe it has not gotten there yet, Linus, but probably when it does, it will be the final straw in this relationship. But
I want Jamila to come in here because you see what I think this is significant of. There is a problem with how the Jubilee House functions right now. I mean, when the deputy president is talking at the cabinet secretaries at political rallies, the president addressing MPs at some hospital event, then there is dysfunction. I mean, isn't there a place where all these people can meet together, have these conversations, resolve their issues? Because it means when there's breakdown of authority, where the deputy president cannot summon, for example, these CSs in his office and tell them what he feels and where he thinks they're being arrogant and whatever it is he claims they're doing against the people of Kenya, it tells you there's a problem, isn't it, Jamila?
Yes, it does. And Joe, we keep talking about how the last time Jubilee had a parliamentary group meeting was in 2017 after the disputed presidential elections, and since then there hasn't been one, despite calls from different members of the party to the president to actually call a PG, watu wazungumze mambo ya nyumbani kindani. And I think, Ashuri, you've said this before, kama kuna shida ndani ya nyumba, people should deal with it within their house. Usitoke nje kule unapiga kelele paka jirani anasikia what your problems are. And we always talk about the fickleness of political parties, and we always say that sometimes you're not sure whether Jubilee will be the vehicle for elections for, let's say, Deputy President William Ruto come 2022, because one, it served its purpose in 2013 and 2017, and you've seen this before. We've seen parties come and go within 5 years, formed 3 to 6 months before an elections. After mmeshinda ama mmeshindwa, inakuwa disbanded and you move on. That worries me about the future of Jubilee right now, considering the fact that now the fights are pretty open, as you spoke about it, Joe. You can clearly see that kuna mgawanyiko. We don't have an official opposition anymore since the handshake, but maybe the opposition now is within the ruling party, Jubilee.
We need to I want to look at it in terms of the overall picture. In terms of the overall picture, it doesn't augur well.
Quickly, then we can take a break.
Very quickly, it doesn't augur well with the politics of the country that such is the conduct of political power. To me, it looks like a situation of indiscipline. It looks really untidy. We can't do this again. You know, there are structures in our system. There's a president, deputy president, and then ministers. This is a dysfunction. It doesn't look very good. I don't know between now and 2022 at this rate how Jubilee can run the country.
Those pregnancies, we'll see them growing. We need to take a break now. We'll be right back with News Gang.